So, hello, peace be upon you. Welcome to another episode of the Happiness Revolution. I say peace be upon you every single time because that is one of the age-old ways, spiritual ways taught in Islam and Christianity and Judaism, and I'm sure probably many other religions, because there's so many links between all the different religions when you study them. It's a spiritual and very wise way of building kindness between people, which eventually will create unity, etc., etc. I talked about that in my first 4 steps, in one of my earliest videos, where I talk about the 4 steps towards the happiness revolution. Anyway, I kind of explained bits on the way to explain my main topic, which is the existence of God. I've talked about it before in some other old series, but not in these episodes called the Happiness Revolution. So there are a couple of things to talk about. There's a lot of misunderstandings about God. First of all, that kind of needs to be explained, as well as the logic behind believing God exists. So there's a misunderstanding that God needs you, that God needs you to pray to them, pray to God. I'm purposely trying to avoid using the word him or her, because God is not a him or her. So how could God, who created the entire universe and is incredibly smart to create, we can create spoons, and we can create maybe robots or microphones, but God can create one of these eyes things, yeah? They're pretty amazing, the brains inside there. God doesn't really need you, yeah, that kind of stuff. You need to get that out of your head. I'm not trying to be rude, by the way, but it's a very important thing. People stop themselves from believing God, and they claim it's logic, but it's a lot of anger that stops them from believing God. Okay, so let's start explaining how you know God exists. First of all, I think is it the first thing? Firstly, basic probabilities. Basic probabilities. Something is incredibly complicated. Let's start with something really simple, and let's say it's a living organism, because people like to say it's different. If it's, living, it could have been affected by this trial and error process that could have created it. So this spoon is a living thing, but it's a pretty simple living thing. It's got milk on it, so I don't want that to spill. Could it have been made by accident? Possibilities. You look at the probabilities and you go, probably not. Not very complicated, but still probably not. Same thing with a human being. It's incredibly complicated. Not only are there just one of us, one freak accident, but there's so many of us. And there's not just us, there are lots of creatures who all seem to be made with a purpose. They're not random things with bits sticking out. All the bits seem to serve a purpose. It's like a chair, okay? It's not just bits of wood, it seems to serve a purpose to be sat on. Okay, so the point is, what I'm trying to get at, believing in God is not supposed to be a complicated thing. It's actually supposed to be an issue of your honesty. Now, when I give these answers, I'm not trying to win a debate or try to make you accept my point of view. I'm only doing it because this is the only way that the world will save itself from itself. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But also, I want to say that I was an atheist for a while, and I can understand why people don't believe in God. And the point of me saying I was an atheist is to show that I'm not trying to say you atheists are stupid. In fact, atheists generally are intelligent. I'm trying to point the mic up, so yeah. So it's by regular surveys and stuff, with these polls and surveys that are taken. Yeah, we know atheists are intelligent. I'm not by saying I was an atheist, I'm trying to show that I'm not trying to win or beat you in an argument. This is me caring about you. So let's have a discussion. Ask me questions if you've got questions. So anyway, so when I was an atheist, what stopped me from believing in God? First of all, the first thing that comes to my mind is that people didn't seem to have answers for me. People who were religious didn't seem to be able to answer the question of how do you prove God exists. And so that made me think, well, if they don't have the answers, then God can't exist. But that's not entirely logical. If God say I'm talking to somebody and I say water doesn't exist, and just because that person can't explain to me that water does exist doesn't mean water doesn't exist. But I need to get back to a really, really important point. Oh, and I'm going to go back and forwards in all sorts of directions, because this is not like some sort of legal case I'm trying to make. This is a conversation between me and you. The reason, and I'm going to come to the reason why you need to know God exists, and in short, you need to know God exists because God is your creator, your designer, and you don't know how to use yourself. It's like a camera, right? The person who made the camera knows best how to use the camera and what it was designed for. And we find a lot of depression and sadness and whatever because we don't fully understand our nature, and we don't really appreciate our spiritual nature, and that we have a soul, and that the soul needs to be treated in a certain way. By treating it in a materialistic way, we starve it of the things it needs. Things it needs are connection between other human beings, being nice to other human beings, but also a connection to God and God himself. This is a habit. I could say herself even, because in the Quran, for example, the main attributes of God are female. Rahman means the womb, the carer, the thing. We are in the womb of God, as it were. If that makes much sense. I don't want to go into different areas too much, but digress is the word I'm trying to say. Because basically we are in the womb of God in the sense that God is nurturing us, and everything that happens to us is not by mistake. Okay, so it might sound a bit weird that I keep going in different ways, because first of all, there are so many videos that have been made on the existence of God. This one might as well be different, but also you have to realise that so many things are interconnected. The reason why we don't believe in God is not just because of the lack of logic, it's because of weaknesses within ourselves, misunderstandings of who God is. So if we're trying to prove the existence of an evil God, then that won't work very well. God is somebody who simply does everything for your own benefit, even if it seems really tough on you. Yeah, so bad stuff does happen, but not by mistake. Okay. So what else was it? So I talked to, let's summarize what I've said so far. Basic probabilities tells you that God must exist. But one basic thing I haven't mentioned is that even if God should exist, that doesn't mean God does definitely exist. And that's where God comes in himself. The first thing really is that God is proof of God. God promises in the Quran and so many other places that in the spirituals, whatever, in the scriptures and stuff like that, God has always said, I'm here, call on me and I'll answer. That's a promise from God. So if you ask God, I really need to know that you exist, and I'll follow you and I'll listen to you. It's not some sort of game where I'm just saying, I want to see if God exists, and I just say, God, you stupid thing, do you exist? And then God will come running after you and say, yes, I exist, and shout at you and whatever. And that way everybody would believe God exists automatically, and there wouldn't be any challenge to your inner truth or against your ego to believe God exists. If God just had a massive face like the moon or something, or much bigger, and just appeared all the time, then there wouldn't be any challenge. The whole point of the existence of God, or believing in the existence of God, is a test of your honesty. So yeah, it's testing. You can see basically that there must be a God based on simple probabilities and the simple logic that you apply in the rest of your life. If you see something complicated, you assume it's been made by something. But when it comes to God, then you go, nah, God probably doesn't exist. It's possible that God didn't exist. That kind of stuff. One of the other misunderstandings are that if you believe God exists, that means you don't believe in science, or you don't believe in evolution. Evolution doesn't disprove God at all. It's just like saying there's a seed that turns into a huge oak tree. There's a process by which it becomes that oak tree. Evolution is the process by which we were made, but that doesn't mean God doesn't exist. That's just because God doesn't use hands to create you. He uses a process. God is subtle, because if he was blatant, then everybody would have to believe in God. So yeah, so there are also one of the reasons why people disbelieve in God is because of the behavior of so-called religious people. So you might see these Taliban people shooting girls who want to study, stuff like that, and they're supposedly religious people, but their own religious books say stuff like, for example, let's talk about these Taliban people who shot this girl called Malala, I think that's her name, because she stood up to them and said, I want to study, right? So are they being religious? Well, their religious leader, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, and I'm a Muslim, I know this, he said that, and it sounds really sexist against men actually, he said, if you get your daughters to study, you will go to heaven. So these Taliban people don't seem to be very religious, are they? If you knew that their own religious founder of Islam said that. What else? Yeah, stuff like that. Anyway, so those people aren't really religious. Just look at the book. They're just politicians, and it's quite well known. Well, it's not that well known, I suppose. That the Taliban were just creations of the CIA. It's not really conspiracy theory. Makes a lot of sense. They were used to fight the Russians originally. Anyway, that's another story. And yeah, so there's a couple of ideas. The main idea is that the main two ideas I want to say is that if you really want to know that God exists, if you really, really want to know that God exists, then just ask God. And God has promised in the Quran, and I think in the Bible, I think that thing I just said was from the Bible, that if you call on me, I will answer. That's a promise. That's a challenge. So go for it. Just ask God. And it's not the only... you might think that all atheists have never had experiences of God. I mean, I remember having a conversation with one of my students. I'm getting a bit long now, trying to be quick here. And he used to be so rude about God. He used to do these Bart Simpson type jokes against God. Because, you know, Bart Simpson, if you watch it, it's kind of always making fun of God. So he would make those kind of jokes. And but one day, I can't remember what the reason was, but he said that he was doing this. It's called the Duke of Edinburgh course or something, award, where they go out in the forest or whatever, and they have to learn some skills, or one of them is orienteering, where you have to find your way around a forest just using a compass. And he got lost, and he was really worried. He just could not find anybody, and he said, you know, what's it called? God, whoever you are, I don't know if you're Jesus, you're this, you're Muhammad, whatever I mean, Muhammad's definitely never claimed to be God, but Allah, whatever it is, don't know what your name is, please help me. And immediately there and then, somebody tapped on the shoulder and said, that way, out of nowhere. So I'm not saying that person appeared from nowhere. God has very individual ways of showing you God's existence. If you only ask. So you don't have to believe that story. Just to make my point, I suppose, in a way, that yeah, people do understand these stories. That's one of the reasons why I'm explaining it. But anyway, the point is, just ask, and God will show you in God's own special way for you, not for the whole world. Well, sometimes it's for a larger group, that God exists. And the other second point is that you really need to know God, and you need to know God for your own personal needs. Okay, you are lost and dead without God. Okay, you'll be depressed. You need to know your purpose, because without your purpose, you're not fulfilling your purpose. And when you're not fulfilling your purpose, you're messed up. Yeah, if you're just making money, if you're trying to be the richest, you know, as they say, if you're just trying to make tons and tons of money until you die, i.e. be the richest person in the grave, as they say, that's not going to make you happy, and deep inside, that's going to make you very depressed. And when you're not fulfilling your true purpose, which is basically to become a beautiful, beautiful thing at one with God, okay, and this is just the beginning, this is just the first stage of it, of your development, this human life. There's a lot of development after that. Heaven isn't a static thing where that's the end of the story, because that in itself is not very logical and not very acceptable to the human heart. Yeah, because the human heart is a reflection of truth if you delve deep within yourself. Blah blah blah. The point is that you need God. You are lost without God. Thank you for watching. Please ask questions. If you have any, just comment.